Good morning. My name is Hema Srinivas. I am from Thai, Hyderabad, and I welcome all of you across the globe to this really interesting panel on investing in smart ideas. Yeah. Um, a little bit about me. I'm into the people development space. I consult on people development areas. I'm a coach. I'm a facilitator and I'm a trainer. And also attempted to author. I've authored a book, so that's about me. Now, investing in smart ideas. The number of investment opportunities and startup pitches that reach investors is mind blowing. So, the question is, how do these veterans in the industry identify the next big idea and that superstar founder? Okay. We'd also like to understand what are some of the industries that are getting more visibility than the others. Okay. Patient capital is something that is talked about. So, what is the approach that these seasoned investors take to the patient capital? And what's the guidance they provide? What's the hand holding they provide to the founder in terms of taking the business forward? Okay. So, can we understand what are some of the tells that indicate that a founder or a starter has high prospects of success? Yeah. So, moderating this panel is Shashank Randev. Shashank is himself the founder at VC, founder VC at 100x. It's India's first venture fund to invest in early stage startups using iSafe notes. He's an angel investor and advisor with a keen interest in B2B emerging technology startups. Shashank is a member of PIOCCI. He was previously the founding member and vice president of VCC Edge and SaaS data platform by VCC Circle. This was acquired by News Corporation in 2015. He launched the SaaS platform, led revenue, product development, and growth initiatives for close to 7 years at VCC Edge. Okay. He's worked with NIIT and Zensar Technologies. Shashank holds an undergraduate degree in Bachelor of Engineering from the Nagpur University and an MBA from the International Management Institute, New Delhi. His specialization include scaling up startups, accelerators, angel and seed investment, venture capital, global open innovation, M&A, cross-border transactions, and entrepreneurship. So that's a fabulous array of specializations, and I'm sure he'll bring out the best from the other two panelists who are on board. So I'm handing this over to you, Shashank. Please take it on from here.
Thank you, Hema, and extremely delighted to be part of Thai Global this fantastic morning. A very good morning to all the audiences who are based out of India, and a very good evening to everybody who's across the globe, particularly in the US. I'm excited about the next 40, 45 minutes. I have two great individuals with a fantastic background, and each one of them bring in their own special areas of expertise. My first panelist is Ashish Ayutt. He's the managing director of Mystery Ventures. A quick background about him: Mystery Ventures provides seed, early stage, and growth capital to startups, incubates new ventures, and provides strategic insights and advice to businesses in India and globally. Ashish's previous role was of a senior partner and managing director at the Boston Consulting Group. He worked with clients across the world, helping them architect their growth journeys in private, public, and government sectors. And from 2015 to 2017, he was the global practice area leader at BCG and was recognized as one of their leading global experts on strategy. He has a BSc honors and MSc degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And with over 20 years of consulting experience, he has developed the thinking on several topics like innovation analytics, new market entry, growth, and strategic planning. Ashish also was featured as one of India's top 40 business leaders under 40 by Economic Times in 2015. So, welcome, Ashish, and looking forward to our discussion. Our second
Thanks, Shashank.
panelist is Dr. Ashish Gupta, who's been the co-founder and senior managing director at Helion Advisors. Serves on several boards, including Pubmatic, Simply Learn, Gupshup, InfoEdge, and Hindustan Unilever. He has co-founded two successful companies, Tevent Technologies and Jungly. He has also worked at Woodside Fund, Oracle Corporation, and IBM Research. Some of his past investments include Daksh, which is IBM, InfoEdge, Make My Trip, Mu Sigma, Upwork, Redbus, and Flipkart. Dr. Ashish is a Kaufman Fellow, holds a PhD in computer science from Stanford University and a bachelor's degree from IIT Kanpur. He has authored several patents, publications, and a book by MIT Press. So, welcome, Dr. Ashish Gupta, and really looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you.
So let me begin. So investors, take on serious risks with the kind of investments and the type of investments a typical angel investor or a VC fund does. New ventures frequently have little to no sales, at least at the seed stage. The founders may have only a faintest real life management experience, and the business plan may be based on nothing more than a concept or a simple prototype. And within all this, every investor is aiming for at least one outlier in their portfolio, a non-obvious potential which leads to hyper growth, but it's difficult to spot and identify. So my first question to both of you, and I'll begin with Dr. Ashish, what steps do you take as a fund to drive the discovery of high growth, aka smart ideas?
So, a lot of different people have different styles and approaches. There are some of the early stage folks go about more bottoms up, which is drive it through a vast network of individuals, especially in some parts in India where the sectors have not become that mature. There are others who will develop top down theses and therefore go after very specialized areas. So, for instance, if you look at the US, if somebody is doing SaaS investing, they will build a network. So either which way, network becomes one part of the game, which is you get known in the ecosystem by either spending time, developing expertise, helping people through one way or the other. That is one very common way. And another word for it is branding, I guess. Successes drive a lot of branding, which usually shows up slightly later in folks' lives and requires one to get lucky. Somebody who has had a few successes is able to drive deals through the brand of that success. It doesn't help to hide that success. Entrepreneurs want to go to people who are perceived as being successful with prior investments, independent of whether capability, luck, or happenstance led to it. And that's the nature of the beast. And so one uses that to drive brand. And last but not least, folks like to work uh, with other people who they can relate to. So at least I have found that genuinely trying to be useful has its paybacks. And most of the world is smart enough to know when you're play acting versus when you really want to extend a helping hand. And that I have found with a lot of entrepreneurs and the investors that I have worked with, myself as an entrepreneur, that folks who are willing to lend a hand, they find that their brand also spreads. So it just engenders good behavior in my mind.
Great. Those are great inputs. Ashish, over to you. Your answer to the question.
Sure. So, I'll not repeat what Ashish had mentioned, just more to supplement that. I think there are two, three things that we try to do and we've seen successful in other contexts of people investing. One is to have a broader view of I would say, overarching trends or mega trends, if you will, which are really what are the big patterns we see socially, economically, politically, environmentally, and try and see which ideas that come to us are really seeking to take advantage of these or ride the wave, which is a little further out. I think having an understanding of these forces and having an overall view which is more macro, I think it's useful for any investing team to have. You need not necessarily make every investment with that as a gate, but it's a good context in which you think about the investment you make. I think the second thing that we've done, which we've seen successfully in a couple of places, is we've created an incubation lab And the idea of that incubation lab is it runs independent of our investing business, which goes on through what deals we either source or approach us. And the incubation lab continue to work on developments in new areas. So, for example, one of the areas we did a lot of work on a couple of years ago is on mobility, to think what's the future of mobility beyond the ideas and investments that exist already, and then see what investments come to us that meet some of these briefs. So the incubation lab is really us like playing around with stuff which feeds our investment thesis. And the last thing I would say is, how do you think a little counter cyclically economically? So, we are set up with a lens of investing in India, but abroad as well. So, do you think of different economic cycles? Do you think of which investment may have much more legs in different markets, and planning that out? So, those would be three things I would add to what Ashish mentioned.
Great. And you mentioned incubation labs, and I'd like to touch upon that in my following questions. Um, but for the audience, smart ideas at seed stage, might not always be scalable beyond a point. And, such initiatives are essentially required for at least developing countries like India, which essentially creates a sustainable early stage startup ecosystem. And we talk a little more about that. But, a lot of rumors about what investors are looking for in founding teams and what can increase the odds of getting funded has always been on the mind of entrepreneurs. And while both of you touched upon the network effect and particularly Dr. Ashish, but how much of this investing, at least at the seed stage, which are primarily right out of an incubation center or a minimal viable product stage, how much of those kind of investments are based on hardcore research or network effect, as Dr. Ashish mentioned, or pure luck? You just happen to kind of take a wild bet in one particular month of a year, and it just panned out. So, hardcore research, network effect, or just luck? Your thoughts on the same? Um, uh, let's begin with Ashish first.
So all three, and certainly the last one, I think never underestimate luck in who you meet, when you meet them, and the way you can understand that pitch. And so I think luck is critical. But if I were to say what's in your hands, then I think some of the elements you talked about. So I think the network effect is very critical. I think being part of ecosystems where you're interested in investing, whether formally or informally, I think is critical. I think co-investing with people with similar perspectives and ideas on some of this is important. More brains are better than few, and really getting these cross perspectives from other investment institutions. So I think that's something we've looked at, and then I would say the research is important, but not definitive. So the research guides us, but it's only an input into the decision making. I don't necessarily believe when an idea is so unformed that the research will answer everything about it. Particularly when the customers are not well defined, that market opportunity does not exist. Research is more helpful when there are patterns around established industries, but having a good understanding of customers we think is critical. And so one of the pieces of research we run, regardless of an investment opportunity, is we run some customer panels through the year on different themes and different subjects related to consumption behavior, and then just use those as broad inputs into some of the new ideas. So that's all three, but different mix depending on the opportunity.
Got it. Dr. Ashish, your thoughts?
By and large, I'm scrambling to figure out what else to say, given that Ashish fully agree with your question. And Shashank, it will be very good to get your inputs also, because
Sure.
you've seen as much of this movie as the rest of us have.
Sure.
A couple of thoughts just to add to what Ashish mentioned. Um, Sometimes, depending upon the space, the emphasis can change. So let's take, for example, a space which is mature, very specialized. Then suddenly the expertise of the team becomes a lot more important. Contrast that with a new consumer play as to what kind of an application will consumers start using. Actually, too much expertise becomes a hindrance, because So enterprise plays, you will find that experience begins to become more important. And I'm just digging a little deeper into the nuance that Ashish had already laid out for us. If I go after enterprise plays, expertise suddenly becomes a little more important. If I go after consumer plays, uh, intuition and trying things out and iteration becomes suddenly more important. New spaces versus old spaces. Uh, if a brand new space is being created, AI for manufacturing, it happens to be one of the spaces that is maybe a couple of years old. There, so little is known that you will find that emphasis on being a good athlete suddenly becomes more important rather than being a great point player. uh, Designing a chip for power consumption in cell phones, it's not about being a good athlete, it's about knowing that space cold, because there are 20 people that you need to know, otherwise you're done. You will never get into the design cycle and what is needed. So depending upon old space, new space, also the flavors begin to change. But would love to hear what you found.
Sure. No, thanks for that, Dr. Ashish. At our stage at 100x.vc, what we've been doing is identifying very early stage opportunity, and that's why I love the topic by Ashish in terms of incubation cells. And just to highlight for the audience in India, this incubation center piece has really developed over the last few years. And for us, for funds like ourselves, seed stage, which are typically the first institutional check, these incubation centers, which are either under Department of Science and Technology or Atal incubation centers, and they're roughly 300 plus, are focused on various sectors. So some of them might be on solar, some of them might be on deep tech, some of them might be on agriculture and agri tech, and we are a sector agnostic fund. So uh, if I have to look at it from a hardcore research, network effect, and luck, I think all three of these play a vital role for a seed fund. Network effect, definitely, we have a network of incubation centers we work with that becomes a sourcing ground for ideas at MVP stage. But as rightly said by Dr. Ashish, when we're trying to identify opportunities, and we've done a few SaaS deep tech companies, the that was the exact point which we were looking at. Are the founders 10 years above our experience? Have they done enterprise sales because the gestation period is long? Over and above what they're building out is unique. Are those parameters which we look out for? In some other cases where we've invested in companies which have, just 3 months ago, we invested in a company which was just fresh out of college, great kids, had a great IP, and had little sense of business, but we felt we could help them out. So there, the decision making process was very different. But either way, at the stage where 100x and I am at in India, I feel that the growing network effect in terms of the incubation centers and the cross pollination of ideas coming in through these incubation centers is very vital for us, because we then uh, invest in these companies, build them out, hopefully attempt to build them out, and then present them for Series A or pre-Series A kind of round. But yes, obviously luck plays a major. We've done 29 investments, and some of the companies we thought would do really well were not. We were surprised they didn't perform that much. There were businesses which we invested in, like a renal project, which is a dialysis center, a very non quote unquote sexy business, but a uh, very grounded business. Has I think I personally evolved as an individual making that investment and seeing it grow. So from a seed stage fund, I think uh, research does play a major role, because we need to understand which companies or which sectors are emerging. But yes, as you both said, luck plays a major role. So with that, I'll move on to my next question, and I think this is an interesting one, and I like for to understand your perspectives, because uh, each investor tends to have a different opinion on this one. Also depends on what stage one comes in at, whether it's a seed stage, minimal viable product investment, or a late stage growth stage investment. So, which is and remains the most important to you while investing in a startup? Is it market size? Is it the founder's background, team, or is it the product slash solution which they're building out, and why so? Dr. Ashish, we can begin with you.
Oh, okay. Um, so there is a generic answer, and then there is all the caveats. Okay, and unfortunately, caveats rule the day. But I'll give you the generic answer first, and maybe Ashish will take us through the real answer. And the generic answer is if there is not a good market, even a good team cannot make a business in that place. So I would rather take as, and this is a cliche that a lot of you would have heard, an A market and a B team as opposed to a B market and an A team, because you are constrained by the size of the box in which you are playing. And as far as the product itself is concerned, it keeps changing. If the team is good, they will figure out what is the right product in that space. So at least in my ranking, the product turns out to be pretty much the least important, because a good team will figure out what is the right product, but you really can't change the team. And you definitely can't change the market. So that's the other way to look at it. Caveats begin to show up when things are unknown. uh, E-commerce in 2010, was it a good market? How do you know? um, and that is where the devil begins to come into all of this stuff. So I'll pause and hand it over to Ashish and see what where he would like to take this.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more. I think the caveats are more than the rules. But if I were to say, when I read this question or I thought about this question, uh, the I reflected on what we do and what is most important to us. And actually, these three are not the most important, unfortunately, for us. I think what we start with is we see what's the vision, and then we see the clarity of that vision reflected into business models. While we do that, we reflect on market size, team, or product. So maybe, to make that real example, you have someone comes to you, they have an idea, and they say, I think this market is so large, and let's say it's an India specific venture. Now, the illusion of markets is there's not one India, there are actually three or four Indias. They operate at very different demographic, income, geographic locations, and very often we see pitches which say that I'm going to serve the largest part of India with a solution or an approach that is actually only relevant for highly urban India. So this clarity of thought between your vision, the market, we find often can be misaligned. And so it's important to have that sharpness of perspective that runs through it. The team, I think, to add to what Ashish said, one thing that we look at is, of course, experience and relevance of being able to pull off the vision they come to us with. But one thing that I find is less focused upon is the dynamic between co-founders often. So we often get pitches from people who are teams of two or three, and we found that their relationship over time evolves. So trying to get an understanding of that and seeing how stable that is, we think is very critical beyond their capabilities to be able to execute the plan they have. And on product, look, I think the key thing is you should know whether you're innovating something that is completely different, new IP that you're creating, or is it in many ways a me too product? And then understanding, if it is a me too, how will you execute that better than what's being done? So maybe on each of these specific things, that's what we look at. I think the ranking is broadly what Ashish said.
And you briefly touched upon it, and I'd like to kind of slightly extend it from there. Founders compatibility, and my question on that would be, while both of you, when you're looking at deals, and you've had a vast portfolio, the experience of fallouts and importance of having a founders agreement, which sometimes tends to be missing at early stages. Thoughts around that?
It's a tricky one, because I think what you can't do in a very short conversation is have the first conversation you have with founders, understand their interpersonal dynamic well, or their arrangement. But as we go through evaluation of a deal, we certainly look at what's the founders agreement in place. Very often these people don't have designated salaries in terms of what they have agreed they will draw from the company and the direction in which they will go. We have found situations where even the equity promise is not clearly laid out in terms of what they are getting for being co-founders. And so, this is the mechanics and, the hard stuff. So we insist on all of this before, any deal goes forward. But the soft stuff is even more important, right? And so we try and understand some of their contexts, how long they have known each other, what they have done together in the past. Often it's a married couple, so that history there. But it's important to delve into this. I don't think there is a very, or we've not found a very strategic way to do it, but I think it's critical to get a sense of, is this a team that shares this vision and will be rewarded suitably and recognize that reward strongly.
Got it. Uh, Dr. Ashish, your thoughts?
So, I've found that even more important than whether the founders get along with each other is whether there is one clear leader who has the ability to take hard decisions. Because what ends up happening in, and by the way, I will not name names, but I've been at least in 3 companies where one founder ended up, quote unquote, eating up the other founders, um, just because this person had a much stronger worldview and wanted to move the company at a pace that the others could not keep up with. And they were all very, very successful, the companies. And I'm not exemplifying this behavior as a desired behavior, so please don't get me wrong. There are plenty of other startups where they continue to be very collegial and work very well together, but they also had a person who was willing to be the leader and take hard decisions. So if I were to stack rank the ability to take hard decisions, even at the cost of founders getting along together, is more important in my mind uh, than having a nice, happy group where everybody is just kind of putzing around.
Got it.
Uh, of course, the ideal situation is that everybody gets along and there is good execution.
Good
The
execution.
other one is, at least I've found that groups of 3 founders is a better size than lot many more or lot few, because that still allows one person to quote unquote fail, because you will find out of 3, one person found that they really didn't want to be in a startup or something else happened and blah blah blah, and still there are 2 people to help each other out.
True.
When it becomes too many, it becomes very confusing. When it is too little, you need a very, very strong personality to be able to survive the ups and downs of that entrepreneurial journey till, of course, one of them can emerge as a leader. So those were just some uh, counterintuitive things to me that I found, because I always used to think they have to get along. And then I found all these examples as we were going along that no, it doesn't have to get along.
No, fair point. I think that's a very important point you made, Dr. Gupta. So, moving on to my next question. Uh, you know, Dr. Ashish, you've had a spectacular journey in terms of the kind of investments you've been part of. You've seen, from 2008 onwards. I was part of an early stage startup back then called named VC Circle, and we were seeing the emergence of private equity funds back then while I was building out the SaaS platform and I was tracking deals. And suddenly we had, in somewhere in 2010, emergence of growth stage funds coming in. And by 2014, we had the seed stage fund slowly picking up. And you've seen companies, Flipkart being one of them, and so many others, ride the first wave. And as I say, this could be the second evolution for the Indian startup ecosystem. Now, in your experience, and also, Ashish, with your experience at BCG and with Mystery Ventures, from your own vantage points, what's the difference between India of 2010 versus India of 2020? And within this, how has deal sourcing evolved for you? Have there been, some fundamental changes? And I think this one's a little loaded question, but within all this, has COVID presented with some out of the box high growth opportunities in 2020?
So the first check I wrote in India was in 1999. And that was the first burst of VCs that got created as an echo of the dot-com boom. And then the dot-com bust kind of took the wind out of that sails relatively quickly. And so between 99 to the middle of 2000, a whole bunch of VC firms were born and gone. Several of them morphed into very successful firms like Chris Capital, which is a
Yeah.
phenomenal track record, and a whole bunch of others, and some did. And then, of course, 2006 is probably what one can put in the second coming of the venture business, which has led to a very stable and a very growing ecosystem after that hiatus of maybe 6 years in the middle. Between 2010 to 2020, I would honestly say it is unrecognizable. It's even hard to go back to 2010 and remember what it looked like because it was that far removed from what today is. Including one of our companies needed to do tech support to get people's data turned on in 2009, 2010, because the telcos didn't know how to turn data on a whole bunch of phones. And this company was leveraging data. So they needed to do tech support to get people to turn their data on so that they could use their apps. So, and right now, when I say this, people would say the guy is like smoking pot. But that was what 9, 10. So it's unrecognizable in my mind because nobody questions whether internet, like, come on, let's talk about the next 3 versions of what's going on. Enterprise SaaS was not a word as far as the India ecosystem was concerned. So pretty much all the stuff that right now we are so worked up about and excited about feels like it's been there forever, wasn't there in 2010 for all practical purposes. And so I don't know what more to say other than to say that it's like having gone from kindergarten to PhD program uh, in a highly accelerated way. And the speed of transition blows one's mind, and therefore one can't remember what the hell happened. It's really that way. As far as COVID itself is concerned, I think for India in particular, now please forgive my the way I'm going to say it because nothing is unidimensional, but on the dimension that you have asked,
Yeah.
so only on this dimension, it's a
Yeah.
boon. And it's a boon on several different dimensions, one of which is that it has just in one fell swoop laid waste to a lot of the reasons why people were not willing to do digital transitions. And so it has accelerated digital adoption by God knows how many years, but it has definitely accelerated it by several years. And depending upon the space, it can be from 2 years to pick a number. Uh, I think it has also put India much more firmly on the map for enterprise SaaS
Yes.
because inside sales is now de facto acceptable to everybody. Whereas feet on street, which somebody would say accounts greater than blah needed feet on street, there is no feet on street any longer. So buyers have gotten used to the pleasure of saying, just half an hour meeting, I get what I need. I don't need to host somebody, give them chai, free up a meeting room, let them be at home. I can get my sales going. So I think India is a huge beneficiary on the technology, entrepreneurship dimension for making money. And because on a whole bunch of stuff will be a very heavy price because of COVID. So let's not even go there. That's my 2 cents.
Great. Great. Ashish, your thoughts?
So I think, 10 years is a long time, but if you look at 10 years back, globally, what was the event that, we are coming out of the global financial crisis.
Mhm.
And if you look at what happened after that, you saw a huge burst of investments. I always find 18 months to 24 months after any kind of economic crisis is a period where a lot of people have kept their powder dry and then will re-enter markets to invest. If you look at funds in India or even funds internationally over the last 1 year, not even during COVID, but before COVID, they've been keeping their powder dry for a set of investment. So I think there's a lot of capital to be allocated, and I think you will see that burst of investment that will happen when people start feeling a little more comfortable. Uh, I think the quantum, both in terms of number of deals and average value of deals, will be much, much higher, exponentially higher. I think in terms of what has COVID benefited, obviously the digital or digitization of different businesses have taken a leap, as Ashish mentioned. But maybe to give some specific examples, I think we've seen three types of business models in terms of ideas that have been impacted by COVID. So the first I would say is repurposing of existing solutions. An example of this is the medtech space. So we've had enterprise medtech companies pitching to us And we've seen them now come back, really saying, how can we take our tech, our IP, and re-customize it to the new context? So if I had, for example, something which was a diagnostic device, can I make it a tracking device just to monitor health of patients? Can I put these in big COVID domes or big COVID centers as an enterprise sale? So we're seeing many more solutions like this on remote tracking from existing diagnostic tools, and across medtech, we continue to see that. The second type of behavior we've seen is people who are consuming, but in a different way. So they're consuming the product, but in a different manner. The best example of this I would give is EdTech, where you had EdTech solutions, but now with a large number of kids at home, many classes thinking they'll have to write off the year, the context of consumption of EdTech has changed. It is really now the primary mode of education for people who are not able to get to school. And so there's a new consumption event that has got created because of COVID. And the third one I would say is what we call creating more product. So because we've lived a little different life to what we have led, there are some products we are consuming more. Good example of this will be media solutions, where you have large number of viewership hours that have gone up. And so a number of solutions in this space, I think, have got benefited, and we'll see that. So these are some themes of
Got it.
repurposing, new event, consumption events, and new product that we've seen.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing the the insights with us. And I'm getting a constant reminder from the Tide team that we are closing in, and there's the next panel awaiting. So my absolute last question to both of you, and this one's for the entrepreneurs and the audience who are watching this session. There is a lot of a lot which entrepreneurs can do in order to position themselves in front of investors and the right investors. So from your perspectives, how important is it for founders to be fundraising from any kind of investor, or the investor who has experience in that particular sector, and this comes from how much value they can add in terms of helping grow the company and scale? So very quick 30-second responses from Dr. Ashish and then Ashish, and then we'll wrap up the session.
So with money you can buy advice, but with advice you cannot always get money. So if you force me to stack rank, I will take money first and then the right money after that. And of course, ideally I want both.
Interesting. Ashish?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is try and find someone who is aligned to your business horizon, whether that is a more patient capital or whether that is someone who will give you the rounds of capital in a shorter period of time, because that is going to be very critical for you to get funded through the journey.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ashish, and thank you, Ashish, for this fantastic session. I had a great time listening to your responses. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I could have easily asked you a bunch of more questions. The topic is so wide, investing in smart ideas, and both of you have such amazing backgrounds and experiences in having invested in ideas. So I request Hema and the Thai Global team to possibly look at a second session, a longer one. But thank you again, Ashish and Dr. Ashish, for taking out the time. Fantastic insights. And thank you, Hema, for getting us together. Thank you, Thai Global, for this opportunity. This was fun, and looking forward to multiple sessions. Hema, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ashish Gupta, Ashish Ayutt, and Shashak Randev for a wonderful session. Key takeaways for me as a person listening is be focused on the scalability of smart ideas, never underestimate luck, the network effect, and be part of ecosystems which can actually help you grow. And I think focus on the the fact that amongst founders, somebody has to take the leadership and take the tough decisions, and also that COVID has presented so many opportunities. It's the right time and the right place to be in, actually. So thank you so much. I've had fun, and I hope that all the people watching also found it really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Thank you.